Hey guys, and welcome to Ash Echo. So we're here to discuss the elements that we have and their reactions to one another. But before that, I'd like to thank Pride1GG for providing us this content. I will put a link to their site in the description of this video. So going back to the number of elements, we do have 7. 3 of them are non-reactive with one another. So if that makes sense. So wind, physical, and corrosion are very standalone. So they have their own abilities and mechanics. So we will more or less park them aside and go with fire first. Okay, so fire, certain echomancers can generate fire zones. Some of them generate fire zones if the environment is actually dry. Fire damage has a chance to generate a fire zone. So it's like generating a spark. A spark. If you are in a dry environment, especially if you have dry leaves, then definitely you'll generate a fire. And they last longer than in a wet environment. So these fire zones, guys, have limits, especially if they're not in their own environment. Usually there's going to be a dry and a wet environment. These are environments during battle. So again, it's related to the weather. So it's if a dry environment, a dry weather, wet environment, a wet weather. So enemies inside a fire zone take fire damage equal to 1% of the current HP, with the damage capped at the value of the TRM stat. TRM is your terminal stat. So terminal stat is determined by your nexus, more or less. We can discuss that in a different video, but not this one. So TRM stat, you can increase that in your nexus. So we'll just leave it at that for now. So lightning can trigger elemental reactions, explosion, electroconduct, and electrolyze, but do not generate elemental zones. So explosions are usually together with your fire. Electroconduct is, I think, with your water. Electrolyze, I'm not sure. We're going to be looking at that later in more of the elemental reactions. So for fire, certain echomancers can generate water zones. So in wet environments, water zones can last longer and can even expand. So again, if your water zone is in a dry environment, it usually shrinks because it evaporates. So they dry out faster. Enemies inside a water zone take 10% more water damage. So it provides a water damage buff to what they call this, to echomancers who deal water, of course. So that is your water zone. For ice, however, ice zones can be generated by echomancer skills or by dealing ice damage to enemies inside a water zone. Of course, for you to create ice, you have to have a water zone, and you need to have you need to deal ice damage for them to freeze the ice beneath your enemies. Ice zones are significantly easier to generate and keep in wet environment, and enemies inside in ice zones will be frozen. Okay? The thing about frozen is there's a chance to trigger frost break, killing them instantly. So that is how good frozen ice and water combined. Then you have frost break. Okay, so those are your elements. Now we are the first 4 basically have interactions we'll be discussing later. The next 3 will be standalone. So wind does not trigger elemental reactions, but it can blow enemies away. Wind is mainly used to control enemies approaching your group or approaching your terminal. Your terminal is the one that you should protect, because once your terminal has 0 in its HP, then you are defeated. So basically, it's gonna be a what do you call this? A tower defense scenario wherein your terminal should be protected at all times. Clear up poisonous mist, which is part of the strategy. The poisonous mist is like a fog of war. We're gonna be talking about that in a different topic, and deals damage to airborne enemies. So that is the function of wind. That is why I'd like to have a good wind Echomancer, handy just in case I encounter a mist, a poisonous mist, or I need to blow enemies away. Okay, so physical does not trigger elemental reactions but can benefit from reaction bonuses such as damage reduction received from vaporization or an extra damage dealt by melt. Okay, when the ice melts, of course, this is what it's referring to. And the last one is going to be corrosion. This one is particularly one of the most interesting ones that I've used. The corrosion team is actually fun to use, but again, you can't use a corrosion team all the time. But it has a fun mechanic, which I'll explain now. Whenever one or more corrosion echomanagers are in the field, a corrosion accumulation bar will appear on the top right of the screen. At 100 corrosion accumulation, this refers to your terminal, a corrosion blast will occur, damaging all enemies in the map based on the current HP percentage corrosion scales with TRM or your terminal, and its bonus can be further enhanced once TRM exceeds 1000 points. So this is a nice additional mechanic, so to say, in terms of probably having it, let's say accumulating corrosion and having one big blast of corrosion dealing to your enemies. That is the whole screen, okay? And let's talk about your reactions here. Reactions are kinda another layer of another layer for you to be conscious of, especially in team building, because each and every Echomancer will have to interact or to complement each other. It's best that you know these reactions or interactions, because it will also follow that you would want to build a team based on these reactions. Okay, so vaporize, in physics terms or in environmental terms, so water being evaporated by fire generates a vaporized zone. So this is a mist, a white mist. Allied Echomancers take 50% less damage while inside the zone. So this is more of a damage reduction ability. So make sure that you have water zones, so that you could have, fire evaporate them and take advantage of the 50% less damage while inside this zone. Okay, next is explosion, which for some reason is actually one of my favorites. So fire and lightning. So if you guys are creating a fire zone and if you do damage with lightning, so when a target inside a fire zone takes lightning damage, it receives additional damage based on attack and MST, which is mastery. Again, mastery is going to be part of the stat that you'll be leveling up in the Nexus, which I will make a comprehensive guide for you guys. Let's just discuss all of the stats here. So we have terminal, we have your attack stat, and you have MST, which is mastery of the unit who triggered it. So technically, this is additional damage from your lightning. This is actually a nice way to deal additional damage. This is explosion, more on mobs really that come your way. Melt, this, we talked about this. So ice and fire, when it's always fire. Have you noticed? So all the zones, you have either a water zone, fire zone, or ice zone. It's basically fire that triggers it or starts it. So when a target inside a fire zone takes ice damage, fire zone takes ice damage, or when a target inside a ice zone takes fire damage. So either or, ice zone. Basically, the easiest would be fire zone and your ice damage, because if you talk about an ice zone, so basically you'll be talking about three elements there. You have to create water, attack with ice, then melt it with fire. So three elements if you wanna melt an ice zone. But if it's a fire zone and you attack, so basically those are just two elements. So things that you should consider when triggering melt. So It triggers melt. Each instance of melt reduces the target's basic damage reduction by 5 up to 60%. So it triggers your enemy's basic damage reduction. So it lowers damage reduction, not increases. Okay? So that is it. Electroconduct. So this one of the things that I like as well, because this electrocutes basically enemies that are on water. So when a target inside a water zone takes lightning damage, it triggers electroconduct. Enemies affected by paralyzed are unable to take actions, so they are electrocuted and paralyzed, unable to take actions, which actually hinders their progress as well. While auto attacks will only paralyze the main target, lightning skills will make the effect spread and affect all enemies within the water zone. So this one is a nice combo to have because of the slowing down effect or the paralyzation of unable to take actions of electroconduct. Okay, so this one, one of the things that I tinkered with as well. Next one is electrolyze. So this one is lightning plus ice. Electroconduct is lightning plus water. So again, when creating ice, you need to have water zone, you need to have ice, then you need to have lightning to trigger electrolyze. So when a target is inside an ice zone, takes lightning damage, it triggers electrolyze. This affects the attack of enemies within the zone by 33%, stacking up to 3 times. Less effective against elite and boss enemies. But this is going to be very, very nice when it comes to mobs. So take note of these reactions because again, this will play a lot in your team building. And the last reaction, which is going to be frozen. The other one is melt, right? So frozen, when a target inside a water zone takes ice damage, or when a target inside an ice zone takes water damage, it triggers freeze. So frozen enemies cannot attack. So you have a variety of ways on how to slow down enemies. Slowing down enemies, you have frozen and you have electroconduct. So those are the two things. Paralyze and this is going to be freeze. Electrolyze is going to be reduction of the enemy's attack. So reduction. Melt is going to be reduction of target's basic damage reduction. So going down of attack, going out down of damage reduction, and explosion is going to be additional damage. And this one, the vaporize, is going to be more of a buff. So Echo Commanders take less damage while inside the zone. So again, guys, this is going to play onto your team building probably as you collect your characters, your Echomancers, and as you learn about their skills and how each and everyone can cooperate with each other, then you'll be an expert on these reactions together with all of these elements right here. So that is it, guys. I hope that was clear on the elements and the reactions. So it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be as it. At first, you're gonna have to have a mix of characters with different elements, but as you go along, you should be able to create your own theme, your own team, and more or less have a couple of combinations of elements on your team so that you can mix and match. Because once you create a team, you can only create 4, but you can sub in 3. So during battle, you can swap those 3 to come inside, basically to create different reactions real time as you figure out on how to push back the mobs that are attacking you. So that is it, guys. Again, comment in the comment section what do you think of these elements and their reactions, and if you need help as well, hopefully I could answer your questions. So thank you very much for staying this far. Take care, stay safe. This is the Warden, and I'm out of here.